Hi guys, it's me, Chancer HD, and welcome to a new episode of This Week in Formula 1. The first episode of This Week in Formula 1 in about a month, and we have some good talking points to talk about today. First off, we're going to talk about why, in my opinion, the Mick Schumacher hype has to stop, and I'll prove why with some examples of his young career so far. We'll then look at Haas taking issue with Renault's stance towards B teams in Formula 1 and why, for me, Haas are correct in their stance towards Renault. And also, I will look at Red Bull clarifying what issues they do have with their car right now and how they are going to fix them very, very soon. Hopefully you guys, no matter where you are in the world, are doing well. And yeah, hopefully we are ready for the latest news in Formula 1. And we're going to start off with the main topic, I think, of this stream, which is to do with Mick Schumacher. Now, you guys may know Mick Schumacher did the post-Bahrain Grand Prix test for Ferrari on the first day and then Alfa Romeo on the second day. He did a pretty good job considering it was his first real time in a Formula 1 car, and the engineers at Ferrari and Alfa were quite impressed with what he was able to tell the team and how he performed in the car. But the reason I think the hype with Mick Schumacher needs to stop is because I have seen it get way too overboard. I've seen plenty of people coming out and saying that Mick Schumacher is definitely going to be a Ferrari driver and that it's absolutely confirmed almost that he will be Charles Leclerc's teammate in 2021 at Ferrari. I honestly think that is completely ludicrous, and I think the hype, even though I completely get it, he's Michael Schumacher's son. I get the hype. The same thing happened with Bruno Senna, for example, and even Nico Rosberg and Max Verstappen, Kevin Magnussen. Drivers' sons or ex-F1 drivers' sons will always get hype because of who they are related to. I get it. And, Michael Schumacher, statistically at least, is the greatest driver in Formula 1 history. So I completely get where the hype is coming from. I completely get it, but I don't think it justifies the hype, honestly, because if you are going to hype a young driver, and we've seen plenty of young drivers in the past been hyped up massively, if you're going to hype up a young driver, you've got to really do it based off the results or the performances that they have put in. Now, Mick Schumacher right now is participating in Formula 2 with the Prema Racing team and is now part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. Now, a big part of why he is in F2 for 2019 and a big part of why he is in the Ferrari Driver Academy is because of what he did last year in 2018 in European Formula 3. But the thing people forget, plenty of people are forgetting with what he did last year in Euro F3 is, yes, he did win the title, but he only won the title because he put on a great final spurt to that season, not because he completely dominated the season. He didn't completely dominate the season. The first half of the season, he was running around really in the midfield, but then in the second half of the season, got his act together and won plenty of races and took the title from Dan Ticktum. It was a great end to that season, and I'm not criticising Mick for his season. He did fantastic in those final few races and did deserve to win the Euro F3 title. But you have to remember that Mick really has only showed, or really only had great performances for what, 4 months of his junior career. I mean, if you look at his career before he started winning races last season, he didn't really do anything massively of note. And as I'll get onto in a moment, in his first weekend in F2, even though he didn't do too bad, to be honest, considering it was his first time in Bahrain, if you take out those last 3 to 4 months of his Euro F3 campaign in 2018, what has he really done to justify this level of hype? He hasn't really done enough to justify the hype of being possibly a Ferrari driver in the future or a race winner in Formula One. He has not justified that hype. But again, I completely get it. I completely get it. Because he is Michael Schumacher's son, I get it. But that doesn't mean he should have this amount of hype. And I actually think, as I'll get onto in a moment, I actually think it's quite unfair for him, because I don't think it's going to set him up for a good... If he does get into Formula One, I don't think it will set him up nicely for his first year or two in Formula One. That's if he ever gets to Formula One, which I think he will, based really on his name, because I think Formula One would benefit massively from a Schumacher in Formula One. But if we go to his first weekend in F2, it wasn't bad. It was okay. I would say at best decent, but it was nothing even really noteworthy for an F2 driver. He was massively outperformed by people like Giotto, Nicholas Latifi, Sergio Sette Camara, by the way, who was a part of the McLaren Young Driver Program. Yeah, he didn't do too bad, but it wasn't a massively amazing performance. And I don't think people should really, again, based on what we saw in his first F2 weekend, I don't think people should be hyping him so massively. I will give him a pass. Sorry. I will give him a pass for Bahrain, because it was his first time racing at that track, and it does with some tracks take time to learn where to brake at the right point and where to accelerate at the right point, and what line to take. It does take time with certain tracks, but it wasn't a massively impressive weekend, and I just don't really see how anyone out there who honestly thinks that Mick Schumacher will drive for Ferrari either next year, which will never happen, or in 2021, I don't see what justification they do have. I don't see how they have any logic or justification, honestly, for saying that, because even if he does have a good year in F2, maybe he does win the title. If he does, he'll probably go to Alfa Romeo in 2020. But Ferrari, for one, are not going to throw him into that Ferrari next year. There is absolutely no way that is going to happen. 0% chance of that happening. Anyone who thinks that Mick Schumacher will drive for Ferrari in 2020 is an idiot. Because Ferrari are never ever going to take a rookie and put them straight into their car. That's never ever going to happen. If he comes into Formula One, it will be to go to Alfa Romeo first to see whether in the midfield against some very good drivers and experienced drivers, whether he can hack it in Formula One in a similar way to see if Charles Leclerc could. And of course, he proved he could and now is at Ferrari. So, he's not going to be at Ferrari in 2020. That is absolutely absurd, honestly, to say. For 2021, I'll be honest, the chances of that are quite small because, yes, Ferrari have took Charles Leclerc on board, and Leclerc is a Ferrari Driver Academy driver, but they took him on board really because Kimi Räikkönen is basically at the end of his career, and also because Charles Leclerc was the only real person they could go for who has or did on the driver market at the time showed that he had the most amount of talent available to replace Kimi Raikkonen. Now, say Mick Schumacher wins the title in F2 in 2019 and gets promoted to Alfa Romeo in 2020. The competition is going to be way tougher for a Ferrari seat, say for 2021, than it was for 2019, because Sebastian Vettel will be younger than what Kimi Raikkonen was, and there will be tougher competition, most likely, for that Ferrari seat, because Max Verstappen, I think, is out of contract around that time. Even though I don't think Lewis Hamilton will go to Ferrari. If by some miracle he does, he could, because he is out of contract at the end of 2020, even though I don't think he could. But still, you have the competition there for that seat. You have, again, Vettel might be able to hang on to that seat and is still a very good driver. So I think people, based on, you know, what the situation surrounding Ferrari is right now and the Ferrari Driver Academy and Mick Schumacher right now, I think people honestly need to calm down when it comes to Mick Schumacher. Yes, I get it. He's Michael's son. We all want him to do well. I want him to do well. But let's not put unnecessary pressure on the guy. In his career so far, he has had 4 good months in his entire career. Sorry, 4 good months in his entire career. But apparently, we're supposed to believe that he's the best young driver out there, and he is guaranteed for a Ferrari seat. That, for me, is wrong, and I think people need to wait and see how he does in Formula 2, which is the best proving ground for any young driver. And I think for him, it's not going to do him any favours. If you're a fan of Mick Schumacher, hyping him or overhyping him too much is not going to do him any favours, because that will hurt his career if he does get into Formula 1, because then when he gets to, say, Alfa Romeo, people will be expecting him to do what Senna did at Tolman, or, you know, what Sebastian Vettel did at Toro Rosso. And I don't think that's going to help his mentality or his confidence in F2 this season, or if he does get into Formula 1. So I think it does have to stop. One, because it's getting way too much and it's getting to the point of being ridiculous. And it's not going to help Mick Schumacher's development, especially in the mental area, if he has this much expectation put upon him when, based on what we've seen in his career so far, he hasn't actually earned, for me, that level of expectation. He absolutely hasn't. I mean, people honestly are hyping him more than they were Charles Leclerc, when Charles Leclerc absolutely deserved his hype because he was a lot more successful when he came into F2. He was a lot more successful before he came into F2 than Mick Schumacher was. So I think the hype really does have to stop. I hope it... Look, the hype is never going to stop with this guy. I know that. But if it can be calmed down over the season, then I think it would be really better for everyone, especially for Mick, because I think the best thing for him would be if he had the least amount of pressure on his shoulders to go racing. Because even though he did have some pressure in Euro F3, it was nowhere near as big as it is now, because now he's basically a part of the Formula 1 circus, because whenever he does an F2 race, he's currently at that time at an F1 race weekend as well. So I think people just need to quell the hype, because some of the hype I've seen, it's honestly ridiculous. Mick Schumacher and Charles Leclerc, yes, we'd love to see them as a driver lineup at Ferrari in 2021, 2022 or beyond. But let's please calm down and wait and see whether Mick Schumacher is actually going to show whether he is good enough, because we don't know if he's even good enough to be in Formula 1. He's had one F2 race and people are still saying, oh, Mick's definitely going to be a Ferrari driver. So I think people definitely have to calm the hype down, because it's getting a bit too ridiculous. But you guys in the live chat, let me know, what do you think about the hype surrounding Mick Schumacher? Is it too much, like I think? And do you agree? Or do you think the hype is justified based on what we've seen of Mick Schumacher in his junior career, basically since last season when he was in European Formula 3? Let me know right now in the live chat, and also in the comment section if you're watching this after the stream has gone up as a video. But before I go to the live chat, don't forget to subscribe, guys, because this weekend is, of course, the Chinese Grand Prix, the 1000th Formula 1 race, and I'll have plenty of content to do with that Grand Prix. You can either subscribe on the bottom right of the screen or click on my channel name and go to my homepage and click subscribe and hit the notifications bell for more content like this. Right. Let me read out some comments and then I'll move on to another interesting topic that will definitely, I think, split opinion. And it is to do with the B team situation and Renault's complaints in regards to that. I just seen NN say, so when is Chazza going to talk about Shell's grapefruit juice? I have seen that story, but it came out too late for me to put it in this news episode. So that is a shame, but yeah, it was too late to put in. Skyman says, hype, no talent. Joseph Friedman says, we need to calm down the hype. I think Mick is a good driver, but he needs some breathing space. Exactly. He does. He's a good driver for his age. He's definitely not bad. He's a good driver, but he's not the next coming of Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen or Ayrton Senna or Sebastian Vettel. He's not. He's absolutely not. The best drivers perform at a top level in their respective series consistently, and Mick has not yet proven that. So how can we say that he's going to be this amazingly great driver? I don't understand. Based on his performances, of course, I don't understand where the hype is coming from that standpoint. I understand where the hype mostly comes from, and it's because he's a Schumacher. But if you look at his performances, the hype really is based on nothing. It's not really based on anything. It's just based on him being a Schumacher. Right, let me find some more comments in regards to this. Sebastian says, Mick will probably get in F1 in 2021. 2021, if he does get into Formula 1, 2021 will be more likely of a season for him to get into Formula 1 than 2020. I think 2020 is, at the moment, I think it's pushing it, honestly. Wishwader says, people are overhyped about the overhype. True. Guyman says, Russell, Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen didn't need 3 years in F2. Well, of course, Russell in his first year last year won the F2 title. Norris finished in second. And Leclerc came in, dominated it. Verstappen didn't even need to go into F2, came into Formula 1 and has been a roaring success, considering, of course, the cars he has been driving. Guyman also says, you would say De Vries, but he can't manage his tyres. But other than that, there are no real top drivers in F2. Yeah, in F2, after Russell, Norris and Albon left, and also Markelov, there's not that much, say, top talent in that series. I mean, you've got Mick, who does have talent for sure, but I don't think we know yet how much talent he does have. Another driver, though, that is, I think, pretty good, Sete Camara, who is Brazilian. Nick de Vries is a good driver, but he's kind of hit or miss. On his day, he is fantastic, but when he's not on his day, he's quite average, to be honest. And then you have other drivers in that series, like the GP3 champion from 2018, Antoine Hubert, Callum Eilert. They're good drivers, but you don't really see that great driver that you possibly saw last year with Russell and Norris, or even the year before with Charles Leclerc. When I look at the field for F2, there's not a standout driver to me, or standout two drivers in the field. I just don't see those standout drivers. Maybe that's a good thing for an exciting title race in Formula 2, but in F2 you want to see who is going to be the next great driver, but I don't really see if there's any great drivers currently in Formula 2. Ronan Brady says, and it's a good point, how did Jolyon Palmer actually win that? I think basically because his field of drivers was not that good. I mean, you had Van Dorn, who is good but not amazing. You had Felipe Nasr. Markelov, I think, was in the series at the time. Giotto, I think, was in the series at the time. It wasn't a great field of drivers, the 2014 field. It was not good at all. So yeah, how he won it is a bit of a mystery, but I think it is basically because the field of drivers just, you know, wasn't that special. I mean, it was kind of like the current 2019 F2 field. It was good drivers, but drivers that will never likely win a Grand Prix in Formula 1 or really ever get onto a podium in Formula 1. John Hubner says, if you're annoyed about the hype, why have a discussion about it? Just let it go, ignore what you don't like. Well, I understand your point, but I'm allowed to talk about things that I don't like, and I have noticed this overhyping of Mick Schumacher, and I think the time is right to make a video on it and just show that the hype is not justified, in my opinion. And TD Emmanuel says, you just sound like an old grumpy fan. Trust me, I'm not an old grumpy fan. I'm far from it. Let us enjoy Mick. This is the thing, you say let us enjoy Mick. I don't think if you overhype the guy, you're going to be able to enjoy him. Because, again, the expectations that are being put on him are way too big when he hasn't showed the talent to be able to meet those expectations. If you're going to drive for Ferrari, you've got to have a lot of talent, and we haven't seen whether Mick Schumacher actually has even enough talent to get into Formula 1. So I don't think, if you're going to enjoy Mick Schumacher, I think overhyping him massively to the degree of saying that he's definitely going to be at Ferrari, I don't think that's going to help your enjoyment of him as a driver. I want him to do well, but, you know, I'm not going to be watching the races and, you know, be absolutely adamant that he must win all these races and stuff like that. And, you know, he has to meet these expectations. I just don't think those are fair based on what we've seen in his career. But I think now we will move on to the next topic, which it might be controversial, this one. I don't know. We'll have to see. It is about Haas criticising Renault's stance when it comes to B teams in Formula 1. And as I'll analyse and explain in a moment, I think Haas's stance compared to Renault's stance is more correct than Renault's. And Haas, of course, when it comes to Renault, since they started this massive midfield battle since the start of 2018. These two teams have not been, say, best friends. Definitely not for the team principals, Gunther Steiner and Cyril Abiteboul. They've not been good friends, and they've been very, very intense rivals in the midfield. And it's no real surprise that they've had a disagreement. And this is what Gunther Steiner had to say when it comes to Renault's disagreement over, say, the influence of B teams. If you missed what Renault's stance is, basically Cyril Abiteboul at the Australian Grand Prix was saying that the influence or the ability that the B teams have to be as quick as they are should be limited, because it is, I believe he said, unfair. I disagree with that, as I'll get onto in a moment, but this is what Gunther Steiner had to say in regards to what Renault have had to say on this issue. And he says, very rightly, they should do a better job and then they would not get the heat. In my opinion, they created the problem themselves by not performing enough and spending too much money. Absolutely agreed. I think they need to up their own game and not try to lower our performance by hindering us. He is absolutely bang on the money. They are criticising B teams because they can't beat them, or they can't beat them well enough. I mean, I know they beat Haas last year, but let's be honest, they struggled to beat Haas last year. They beat Haas because Haas beat themselves, not because Renault had this incredible speed in their car. If Haas had the experience that Renault had, Haas would have finished in P4 in the Constructors quite comfortably in 2018. But because Haas don't have the experience, that's why Haas finished in P5. So Renault, basically, since the start of 2018, have had this issue with B teams, and I think it absolutely does start with Haas F1. Now, the reason Renault's stance when it comes to this is wrong is because in the current climate of Formula 1, for the smaller teams, and that's excluding, of course, Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, Renault, and McLaren, for those smaller teams, like a Toro Rosso, like a Haas, like a Alfa Romeo that used to be Sauber, I'm afraid with the way the finances and the prize money is and the current financial situation in the world, B teams or technical partnerships with a bigger manufacturer is really the only way to go if you're going to survive in Formula 1, not have financial troubles, and be able to be a success in Formula 1. That's the only real way right now, based on the way the financial structure is in the sport, that you can have moderate success compared to where you would be if you did not have that either financial support, technical support, or both. For example, Toro Rosso, as you may know, were previously Minardi. Toro Rosso took over from Minardi at the end of 2005 going into 2006, and of course Toro Rosso have benefited massively from being owned by Red Bull. They won a Grand Prix in 2008, for example. Have had plenty of points finishes, and some seasons they finished very well in the Constructors. If they did not, Minardi, become Toro Rosso and not become a B team, Minardi would not be on the grid, and there wouldn't be a Toro Rosso to be, there wouldn't be a Minardi to buy to create them as Toro Rosso. So they had to become a B team, because if they had said at the end or during 2005, you know what, we don't want to become a B team, we want to be our own team, Minardi would have gone out of business. They were saved multiple times during the early 2000s, mostly by Bernie Ecclestone, especially in 2003. They were saved so many times financially, and they couldn't cope anymore. or if they were to continue going on as Minardi, they wouldn't have gone that much further. They probably would have gone out of business around, say, 2007 or even 2008. They had to become a B team. If they didn't become a B team, all of those engineers and people that were working at the team would have been looking for a new job somewhere else and would have been unemployed. Because Red Bull decided to take that team over, and they were willing, Minardi, as they then transitioned into Toro Rosso, they were willing to become a B team. That saved them, and now has meant that Toro Rosso, even though Toro Rosso have never been a strong team at, say, the front of the midfield, they're now able to survive in the midfield financially. They don't have massive financial pressure on them and can go racing. And we have an extra team on the grid when, if they were still Minardi and they didn't accept Red Bull's offer, this team, based where they are, would not exist. So for that instance, or that example, B teams do work. Also, when it comes to Haas, it's another example of this type of situation working. Now, Haas, I don't think Haas anymore are necessarily a B team. They're more so a team that has a technical partnership with the main, or their main supplier, which of course is Ferrari. Now, I honestly think if Haas did not decide to forge this technical partnership with Ferrari before they came into Formula One, I don't think Haas would be really any good, and they may not even be in Formula One anymore. Because, I mean, you saw, when Caterham, HRT and Manor, when they came into Formula One in 2010, they had no technical partnerships, no partnerships with really anyone, and they struggled massively at the back of the grid because they had no financial or technical help with their teams, and they were all gone by the end of 2016. Because Haas have had this technical help, and I think probably somewhat financial at times, they are able, one, to go racing, but two, be a real midfield competitor and fill up a space on the grid in a useful way, and not just be another backmarker team that is miles off the pace and gets lapped, 3 or 4 times. That, again, is another example of, say, a B team initiative working in Formula One. And again, if they didn't have that kind of help from Ferrari, I don't think Haas would be really a success in Formula One, and I don't think they probably would have even come into Formula One if they didn't have a technical partnership with another team or a manufacturer team. I don't think they would really have bothered coming into F1, because with the way F1 is, it's too expensive to enter Formula One without any help, or without being helped financially. It's too expensive. So they really had to do what they did to be what they have been so far, a very successful new team. They have been very successful for a new team, in a similar way to how Sauber were successful when they first came into Formula One. But of course, they were a sports car team before they came into F1, and I think had a bit more standing in motorsport than Haas had when they came into Formula One. But still, they've been a great success because of help from a manufacturer team. Another team that's had help, Alfa Romeo, who were rather Sauber. Now, you guys will remember 2017 Sauber was struggling so bad financially. The team principal, Manisha Kaltenborn, was fired because she wasn't doing good enough at Sauber. The car was terrible. They had a year-old Ferrari power unit. But then when Frederick Vasseur came into the team, he made sure, because he knew the only way for that team to survive was to have a technical or financial partnership with Ferrari. And now this team has both. They have a technical partnership with some engineers moving from Ferrari to Alfa, such as Simone Resta. And they do have a massive financial benefit from Ferrari. And again, if they didn't have that, they would not be on the grid. If they had stayed as Sauber, the Sauber that was around in 2016 and 2017, Sauber would have died. They were not going to survive in that state. They were all over the place, had a terrible car, and had really no hope in that state to climb up the Formula One field. But because they had, or came to an agreement on a technical and financial partnership with Alfa Romeo coming on board, that saved the team and allowed them to stay on the grid and fill up a slot in a similar way to Haas in a useful manner and be a competitive midfield force. And now, if you look at the constructors, Alfa are P4 in the constructors. So clearly it has helped, but it's been in a positive way, not a negative way. And for me, I think those three examples, for me, really prove that B teams are the only real way to go if you're a small team or a new team coming into Formula One that is not a manufacturer. If you're coming into Formula One and you're not a big manufacturer team, or you're a F1 team right now that is small and struggling, you really have to be a B team if you're going to get by, because financially it's not really possible to be a success and be a small team without being a B team, because that is unfortunately just the way Formula One is with its current prize money and just pay structure. That's just the way it is. And I honestly think teams like Williams would benefit massively from being a B team to Mercedes. Now, Claire Williams said in the Netflix documentary Drive to Survive that it would be over her dead body for that team to become a B team. Well, if that's her stance, then you better get prepared for no more Williams F1 on the grid, because unless that team really reverses their fortunes and becomes a very, competitive team in the midfield again, if they don't become a B team, I don't see how this team survives. Because again, in the current way of Formula One, it's the only way for a midfield or small team to survive and be competitive in the midfield. Now, you've got teams like Racing Point, for example. You could say that, well, they aren't a B team and they're getting around just fine. Well, look at last year. They could have gone out of business last year and were saved by Lawrence Stroll. The only reason Racing Point are on the grid is because of the Stroll family, nothing else. If they went to being a B team to Mercedes, they also would have been financially and technically, I think, better off. So, for me, Renault's criticism just, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. And I think, as Gunther Steiner said, stop moaning, get on with it. You've got way more money and resources compared to a Toro Rosso or an Alfa Romeo or a Haas, especially a Haas. Haas are one of the smallest teams, if not the smallest team on the grid, and they've had a faster car than you for, what, a year? And they've got a great chance of beating you in the constructors this season. I still don't think they will, but they've got a great chance of beating you in the constructors, and that should not be tolerated. And I think Renault, honestly, instead of moaning about, you know, B teams are too powerful, they're having too much of an influence, you're in a privileged position. You have tons of money and resources. You don't have to worry about finances. So you can't criticize what they've done. They've done the right thing to save their teams or keep their teams in Formula One in a competitive or on a competitive basis. So I don't think the criticism, honestly, is justified. I don't think it is. I think their criticism just, it makes sense. I understand what their point is, but I don't think their point is correct. Because, again, with the way Formula One is, financially, you cannot, if you're a midfield or small team, race and be competitive in a financial and technical way and not be a B team, because the prize money in Formula One is so messed up. That's the only way you can go about it. They've done well in, you know, forging those partnerships and creating those partnerships. Renault should not be moaning. Instead, as Gunther Steiner said, get on with it and try and perform how you should be. You should be beating all of those teams. There's no excuses. No excuses whatsoever. And for me, that is exactly what Renault are doing. They're making excuses for them not being as good as they either think they're going to be or maybe that they want to be. They should not be making these excuses. As Gunther Steiner said, get on with it, stop moaning, and actually come up with the results that you really should be against those smaller teams. But I think, guys, I have ranted enough when it comes to this subject. I want to hear from you guys when it comes to B teams. Do you agree with them or not? And do you agree that with the current way Formula One is with the money, do you think that really for small or midfield teams that B teams or technical partnerships or financial partnerships with manufacturer teams is the way to go? Because I think it is. I don't hate on those teams for doing what they have done. I think what they have done is the best that they've done for their business, and I don't think, honestly, Cyril Beatbull can really understand their position massively. I mean, I know he worked for Caterham, and I think he was the Caterham team principal, but he had those connections to Renault, and when Caterham went out of business, he just went straight to Renault, and was in no, danger with his position. So I don't think Renault should honestly be so high and mighty on the matter. And I think, again, just get on with it and actually perform how you should perform based on the money you are spending and the resources you have compared to a team like Haas or even Racing Point, Alpha, Toro Rosso, and the list goes on. But yeah, let me know in the live chat what you guys think, and I'll try to read out as many comments as I can before going on to the final topic of this stream. Right, let me start reading some comments in regards to this. By the way, if my throat sounds sore, it's because it is. There's nothing I can do about it. I tried to help it before I came on, but yeah, I couldn't help it enough, of course. Rona Brady says, I think B teams are good for making smaller teams more competitive and staying in the sport. However, I don't think it's a good thing from the point of view of drivers racing each other. Well, if you want the teams to be competitive, then they're going to race each other. That is the result of making them more competitive by becoming a B team. So that's just the way it is. And by the way, Mr. Random Guy makes a great point. When is your throat never sore? True, it's always sore, to be honest. NN says, we barely have 20 cars on the grid, so B teams are needed right now. Exactly. If we didn't have B teams, and the teams before, or the team that was there before that technical financial partnership came about, you wouldn't have Toro Rosso on the grid, because they were Minardi, and Minardi were very soon at that point gonna leave the sport. Sauber was struggling a lot financially in 2017. Who else? Haas. I don't think Haas would have entered the sport if they didn't have a technical partnership with Ferrari. And who else have you got? I think those are the three main examples. I mean, you'd have 14, 15 cars on the grid. You can't have Formula One with only 15 cars on the grid. So you need those B teams, I'm afraid. You need them, because if you don't have the B team initiative, then you're not going to have that big of a grid, and it's just going to be full of manufacturer teams or historical teams, and that's what we don't want Formula One to be. We want those teams that are privateer teams that can, you know, against all odds, even though they are a B team or have some kind of financial help, can go racing against those bigger teams. Ronan Brady says, you misunderstood my point. I mean, the smaller teams won't be allowed to race the bigger ones. Oh, okay, that's what you meant. That is the only downside to the B team, initiative, I'd call it. That's the only downside, is that a team like Haas or Alfa Romeo will never be allowed to develop as much as the main source, which is Ferrari. They won't be allowed to develop their car as much as they will, and if they struggle, then Haas and Alfa Romeo will struggle. I do see your point when it comes to that, but you know, the teams, I think they kind of accept that, honestly, because they're not expecting, even if they did have the money, I don't think they're expecting to go racing with teams like Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes anyway. So it is a downside, and sometimes it can really affect how high they can climb in Formula One, but that's just the way it is. Sometimes you've got to make those compromises. And I think, to be honest, if Haas ever want to become a proper success in Formula One and contend for podiums, race wins, and even world championships, then Haas are going to have to split off their partnership with Ferrari. But they are not going to do that for a long time. Probably not for another 5 years at the very, very least. Wishwader says, if B teams is to be a fair concept, there needs to be improvements on the rules. Example, an A team must supply equal components to B teams by the following race, not delayed indefinitely. I do have a video coming out tomorrow, by the way, guys, which is to do with Formula One in 2021. And that is actually a part of the 2021 rules, that customers, especially when it comes to the power units, will get equal parts or the same parts as the big engine manufacturers or big manufacturers in general. So that is something that they are trying to resolve, and that's a good thing. Joseph Friedman, how soon do you think Williams will be gone if they don't become a B team? They got lapped, or they get lapped twice in most races. I'm tempted to say by the end of 2021, they'll be gone. I think by the end of 2021, in their current way or format or way of business, I think Williams will be gone at the end of 2021. I just don't see how that team can prosper and be successful in their current way. And if they don't accept help and don't become a B team to Mercedes, then they're going to go. It's as simple as that. They're going to go. They're going to end up like Minardi would have ended up if they did not take that deal from Red Bull with Toro Rosso. So if I was Claire Williams, I would absolutely try to get either a technical partnership or a big financial partnership going with Mercedes. Because another thing, which I think some of you already know, but Mercedes do put the most amount of money into their F1 team, I think, out of anyone. So why wouldn't Williams want to have some of that themselves? I don't get it. For Williams, I think the reason they don't want to do it is basically because of pride. They don't want to become a B team. They want to remain as a privateer team. But with the way they are at the moment and the way Formula One is financially, it's really impossible for them to survive forever being the way they are. So I don't get why they're not a B team. They absolutely have to be a B team. By the way, in regards to the Mick Schumacher topic, I just found a good comment in regards to me talking about the overhyping of Mick Schumacher. It's from Count Blanc. It's a good comment. He says, Chaz is dropping facts, and some people use emotions to defend what they like regardless of the facts. I rate the facts and logic. Chazza does too. Yeah, when it comes to, arguing a point of view in general, I like to use facts rather than emotion. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to Mick Schumacher, they're using emotional attachment rather than actual results and fact-based logic, I guess. But anyway, I think now we'll go on to the final topic, because we're coming up to an hour, and I was only intending for this stream to be an hour. So we're going to quickly move on to the final topic, and it is about Red Bull, who have come out and said that they know what the aerodynamic issues are with their car, and that they are going to bring what they hope to be a fix for the 2019 Spanish Grand Prix. And of course, the Spanish Grand Prix tends to be the Grand Prix where the teams bring their biggest aerodynamic or chassis upgrade for a season. So I think Red Bull are going to bring something big to that Grand Prix. But in regards to these comments from Helmut Marko that I'm about to show you, it's quite interesting what he says, and I think I know what area. Hold on a minute. I think I know what area of the car they are struggling with. I think by his comments we can kind of guess where the issues are with the Red Bull car. So he says, in Bahrain, we identified a weakness in the aerodynamics. We think we know the cause and have already implemented amendments. It's not a conceptual problem, but a detail thing. And it's not the first time it has happened. Now, I think it's either one or two things. Either... by the way, I don't think it is the front wing. I don't think the Red Bull front wing is why they are struggling. I think it's more so to do probably with either the barge board or the rear end of the car around the diffuser. Or when he says, I'll go back and show you, when he says, and it's not the first time it has happened, it might be the same issue as to what they had at the start of 2017. They might be having correlation issues. Now, the start of 2017, the reason they were so slow was not just because of the Renault power unit at the time that was so god-awful. It was also because Red Bull's wind tunnel and R&D was not correlating to the on-track performance. And the parts they were putting on the car were not, say, making sense. Now, that could be what's happened again. I don't think that's what it actually is, but I think if I was to say guesstimate, I think it's either certain parts of the car that they have designed for 2019 haven't worked out as well as they thought it would. And I don't think, by the way, it's anything to do with the front wing. I think it's more so the barge board or the rear end of the car, or they're having correlation issues. I think it's more likely that some of the detail, maybe on the barge boards or even the rear end of the car around the diffuser, maybe it is those areas. Because as he said, if I go back, he said it's not a conceptual problem, but a detail thing. So some of the details, and you can kind of see it here on this picture of the Red Bull on the side angle. There is a lot of detail, but maybe some of that detail has actually cost them some performance. So I think it shouldn't be a massive fix, honestly. I don't think Red Bull are going to be searching for months and months for a fix for this issue. I don't think they're going to be massively struggling, say, in the next few races or the couple races after the Spanish Grand Prix. I think once we get to Monaco, for example, they will be very, very good. But I think maybe in one area or a couple areas, Red Bull just have got it maybe slightly wrong. And I think they kind of need to revise the details of certain areas. And I think that's what he's kind of saying, is that some areas have great detail, but they need revision and they need to be looked at, redesigned, and then seen to be actually good on the track. Because, you know, we've seen the Red Bull car in detail, it looks absolutely fantastic, but sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes there's either too much detail on the car, or some of that detail just isn't doing what they want it to do. So I think that's probably what it is. But guys, do you think, before I come to the end of this stream, do you think Red Bull can get this issue fixed after the Spanish Grand Prix? And do you think they'll return to, say, 2018 levels of performance if they do fix this issue at or after the Spanish Grand Prix of 2019? Let me know right now in the live chat, and also rather the comment section down below, and I'll respond to as many comments as I can. But again, don't forget to subscribe, guys, for the Chinese Grand Prix content coming up this weekend. Practice watch-alongs, qualifying watch-alongs, race watch-alongs, qualifying reviews, race reviews, the whole lot coming up this weekend. So don't forget to subscribe for that content. But now let me find some comments in regards to this. By the way, thank you to Still I Rise, who says good stream, and says he's here at the office at I guess it's now 3 PM in the States, wherever he is. I think I don't know where you would be in the States, maybe Midwest. I don't know. I don't know my time zones very well when it comes to the US, because there's quite a few different ones. Wish Wader. They gave away their wings and later found they needed them. By the way, thanks to Ronan Brady for coming along for the stream. NN says they are complaining about instability under acceleration. That might be something to do, and he says about the floor that if it's an issue with instability on acceleration, that will be the rear end of the car, because you need a good, stable rear end of the car to have stable acceleration out of especially slow corners. So That sounds to me like it's a rear end issue. Tonka Toy Truck says, I am wondering if Gasly's driving style is so different from Max's that he is struggling with the setup. They definitely have different driving styles, Pierre and Max. But it still doesn't really, I guess, give an excuse for Pierre's poor performance. He should be a lot closer to Max in terms of speed, even if he's not having the greatest time with the car. NN says, I believe Red Bull will struggle for the first half of the season and McLaren and Renault will actually give them a hard time in the races, and McLaren possibly in qualifying. I completely disagree. I don't think McLaren and Renault will be close to Red Bull. Maybe not at any point this season, but say 90% of this season, I don't think McLaren or Renault are going to be close to Red Bull. I just don't see that. Red Bull will be at worst third fastest, but still comfortably, I think, ahead of the other teams because, you know, they'll develop very well. They're the best team in Formula One at developing over the course of a season. Renault and McLaren are not going to develop as well as Red Bull do. So yeah, I don't see that happening, but hopefully it does. Hopefully it does. Jay Crail says Red Bull is fine. They'll sort things out probably earlier than we expected. Yeah, if they sort out the Spanish Grand Prix, then it's, you know, a nice quick fix. By the way, Sebastian, yes, I am. He asks, are you doing a practice 2 watch along on Friday? Yes, I am. The practice 2 watch along will be from 6:30 AM UK time until about 8:45 AM UK time. So yeah, that's coming up Friday morning for practice 2. Right, let me find a final comment and then I'll come to the end of the stream. By the way, thank you guys for coming along on a Monday evening to this episode of This Week in Formula One. And by the way, I will let you guys know as to the content schedule coming up for, say, this week, basically, because I might as well let you know now. Wishwader says Red Bull is the only team on the grid not competing, too slow for Merc, and Ferrari too fast for the rest. Yeah, they're kind of in a and I think says they're kind of in a no man's land. They're just not really that close to anyone, either ahead or behind. But I'd rather be comfortably third fastest than like Racing Point were at times in Bahrain, where, you know, comfortably the slowest in the midfield. And Justin says Williams not competing too. Estefano says more issues on the Red Bull are going to show up. Hopefully not. Right, I'll find one more comment and then I'll end. Just trying to find that final comment. And I'll end on a comment from Corolla, who says Red Bull is fast in developing. They absolutely are. And again, they are the best team in Formula One at developing over the course of a season. But guys, that has been it for tonight's episode in This Week in Formula One. I am going to try and do this more often because I've only done it once last month and once the month before, and I think I need to start doing the news show a bit more often. Obviously there has to be news for me to do that, but I'm going to start doing it more often because it's good to do these things and very interesting to do this and give my thoughts on the current news in Formula One. So I'm going to try and bring this back again this time in 2 weeks time. So the start of the week for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, it will be in a fortnight's time. So I'm going to try and do this, say, every Monday night if I can. But again, there has to be news for me to do so. But thank you guys for coming along. And also, don't forget to subscribe for more content coming up on the channel like this. What is coming up on the channel, you may ask? Well, this is what is coming up. Tomorrow at 4 PM, I will be uploading a video about Formula One in 2021 and what we know so far. And I will analyze and show what it looks like we're going to be having in terms of rules for Formula One in 2021. And it's actually quite exciting. And it will be the biggest regulation change probably since 2009. And it's going to be quite exciting. And I think if it does come through, which it should by the end of June or start of July, it is going to be pretty exciting. But yeah, I'll give all the information on that tomorrow at 4 p.m. Then on Thursday at 4 p.m, I'll be doing a video celebrating the 1000th race in Formula One history, looking at the 10 best races of all time from the 50s all the way to now. And I think I'm going to have some interesting choices in that top 10. And I'll also let you guys vote on a poll as to what your best race, say out of the 10 I picked is, or best race of all time is. And then I'll reveal the results of that in my Practice 2 watch along. Practice 2 watch along for the Chinese Grand Prix of 2019 is at 6:30 a.m. on Friday morning. Then the qualifying watch along on Saturday morning is at 6 a.m. UK time, and then the qualifying review, which of course is live, will be at about 11 a.m. UK time. And then on Sunday, I'll be live at 6:10 or 10 past 6 a.m. UK time for the 10 past 7 a.m. Race start on the Sunday. And then, if you don't know or didn't know, if you didn't watch the podcast, by the way, if you have not seen the podcast, we did a 2019 Chinese Grand Prix preview. It's in the description. The link is there in the description. You can go watch it right now. I said in that and announced that the race reviews for Shanghai will take place on Sunday instead of Monday. So the race review will be around 12 p.m. UK time on Sunday afternoon or Sunday lunchtime, about 3 hours after the race has finished. And then, of course, the Monday after, if there is incidents to analyse, then I will analyse it on the Monday night. But there you go, that's the content coming up in the next week or so. And hopefully you guys have subscribed and you hit the notifications bell for that content that is coming up. Also, don't forget to like this video and comment down below what you thought of this video, and what did you think of what I talked about in this episode of This Week in Formula One. And yeah, just share your thoughts on what I had to say and what you think of, say, the overhyping of Mick Schumacher, the B team situation, and do you think Red Bull can improve after the Spanish Grand Prix with some upgrades to their aerodynamics? Also, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That's the best place for notifications for my videos, and it is the hardcore Chazza HDF1 community, so you can go over there and join that, and we're quite interactive in that server. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110, where you can keep up to date with me and what I'm doing in the F1 community or with my channel in general. And also check out my website, chazzahd.com, for more content like this. But guys, until tomorrow at 4 p.m. with my next recorded video, but until the next live stream, which will be 6:30 a.m. UK time for the Practice 2 watch along for the 2019 Chinese Grand Prix, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.